want to welcome you to Wallace State's first virtual career fair. I hope that these workshops are helpful for you, and I look forward to working with you today. So my name's Jamie, and this is Chrissy, and we work for Career and Workforce Development, and today's workshop is going to be about writing resumes and cover letters. So the first thing that I want to tell you is there's multiple ways to do a resume and cover letter. The only right way to do one is the way that gets you the job. So take our suggestions with a grain of salt and continue to play with the resume that you have until you get the job that you want. One of the things that comes up a lot for us is to format or to not format. And my take on it has always been really plain and a lot of white space for anything submitted online. And then I bring something graphically appealing when I come into the actual interview. One of the things to keep in mind is that some places use what's called an applicant tracking system, ATS. And when they submit those, if it's heavily formatted, sometimes the computer won't be able to read all of your skills. So we'll talk a little more about that later, but that's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about how to set your resume up on the page. Chrissy, go ahead.
So I think since we're talking about, starting to work on our cover letter and our resume, one of the very first things that you should be doing before you even try to tackle those is to do some research, right? So whatever company it is that you're applying for, whatever job it is that you're applying for, you yourself need to be well versed in being able to speak about that company and that job. So that means hopping online, researching the company, talking to people that you know that may work there. It also means that job description, you need to know what's in that job description. Even if there's things in there that you're unfamiliar with, like a type of software or, terminology that's unfamiliar to you, look that up and become familiar. And then the things that you just can't learn on your own, those are things that later on you can kind of use that and turn those into questions to ask at the end of the interview process, things that you want to know from that employer. So that's one of the big things, is just that researching and becoming knowledgeable. That also helps you become more prepared for the interview itself and cuts down on some of that nervousness that you're going to experience when interviewing. So the more research you can do and the more knowledgeable you can become, I think the better outcome when it comes to your resume, cover letter, and the interview itself. Whenever you are putting together your cover letter or your resume, those need to be customized to each individual job that you apply for. Even if you're applying for multiple jobs at the same company, you never want to turn in a cover letter or resume addressed for like one job when in fact you're applying for another. I can't tell you how many times that I've seen that, not just with students that we work with, but even here where I work at. If you're on a committee and you see a cover letter from someone and they have the wrong job title in the cover letter, it just kind of seems like they're just using that same cover letter over and over again. And so really take the time to customize your cover letter in your interview so that it's based on the skill set and the qualities that those employers are looking for that particular job. When you are putting together your cover letter, this isn't a time to tell your entire life story. I'd love to see it at one page because a cover letter is kind of your introduction, right? This is the first thing that they're going to look at and read about you. The cover letter itself should try to be addressed to a specific person at the company. So if you don't know a Mr. Jones or a Mrs. Smith that works there, that's okay. You can still address it to hiring manager or hiring committee or interview panel or whatever it might be. At least try your best to make that specific. Okay. When you are working on your cover letter, the way that I kind of like to think of it is the 3-paragraph format. Your first paragraph is going to be, hey, I see that you have an administrative assistant position available at XYZ company. I'm very interested in this position because, so that could be because you've researched XYZ and you like their core values. It could be because you have experience in administrative assistant in the past. It could be that this is what you were going to college for, or whatever it is for you. But that's your time in that first paragraph to really point out that you know what the job is, you know what the company is, and you're expressing interest overall. Now, I would try to stay around 2 to 3 sentences in that first paragraph. It doesn't have to be anything over the top. So moving on, second paragraph is your time to say why you are the right fit for that job. So this is where you go into a little bit more detail. I would say 3 to 4, maybe 5 sentences about what skills you have that match up to that job, or what qualities you possess that match up to that company. And so you can talk about any degrees that you have, any certifications, any years of experience that directly relate to that. But this is that paragraph where you sell yourself. Okay, so that's a really important one. The last paragraph is kind of the wrap up. That's where you, once again, reiterate why you're very interested in this particular position. You usually would start it out with something, once again, thank you so much for your time and consideration. I just want to say that I'm very interested in working at XYZ. I would love to be a part of your team. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm available for questions or to schedule an interview. Some people include their contact information and availability, and some don't. That's okay. But you're basically closing the deal and you're doing a call to action. You're putting it in their hands now and asking them to reach out to you. So that one is also just about 2 to 3 sentences. It doesn't need to be anything over the top. Whenever you do put your cover letter together, be very aware of how many sentences you start with I. If you start, every single sentence with I, it just doesn't add enough complexity to your cover letter. So go back and look at the sentences that you've wrote out and try to find ways to kind of rearrange your wording so that you're not starting every single one with I. I've had a couple cover letters here recently that I've looked at, 3 paragraphs, and there's like 17 sentences and they all start with I. So let's try to avoid that. The other thing is make sure you sign your cover letter. I know in some instances you're going to be submitting this electronically, and that's okay. You can still sign your cover letter and then find a way to scan it in and send that one. Having that signature on there, again, customizes it, personalizes it. And so I think there's less chance of you submitting the same cover letter over and over again for each job. So I think those are a couple of really good suggestions.
So I'll add a few things to that. I actually use a very similar format for my cover letter, and I cannot emphasize enough that you tailor it for each. I keep a master cover letter and a master resume with sort of my outline, so that all I have to do when I apply for a job is just change things around and tailor the wording a little bit. In my first paragraph, I do use a little story, but the emphasis is really on little. I want to talk about why I'm passionate about that job. It's a great idea to look up their values, and you can also talk a little bit about what brings you to that position. So for example, when I was applying for this job, I talked about my passion for education. And I gave 1 or 2 sentences about what brought me to that passion. Give them a reason to be curious about you and want to look at that resume. In the second paragraph, I use mainly my soft skills and leave my hard skills for the resume itself. Again, it doesn't matter as long as it's getting you the job. So I try to keep those separate so I'm not repeating myself. But I keep it to things like my work ethic, my communication skills, how I'm quick to learn, and I'm a team player. And then that last paragraph where you're like closing and wrapping things up, one thing I see a lot of is folks trying to specify when to contact them. I don't do that at all. I just say, contact me for an interview. It's my job as the job seeker to be ready and willing to pick up the call and answer the email and respond to that. So, and that's another thing, most of us don't really answer our phones that often, especially if it's a strange number. But if you're job seeking, you want to be prepared to answer every call and just expect you're going to hit a telemarketer or 2.
So are we ready to jump into resumes now? Resumes. Resumes are fun. And again, this is another opportunity for you to customize and tailor this so that it's your resume. And of course, tailor it so that it matches up to the job you're applying for. Again, when I'm working on resumes, I strongly encourage our students to keep it to one page. I will say that if you use things like Microsoft Word or Google Docs to go and try to find a template, those sometimes are not as easy to manipulate and format. And so you'll find yourself running into a second page when it's really not necessary. So we here on our team, we use a thing called Canva. And so that's Canvas without the S. You can go to canva.com and there's tons of wonderful resume templates out there. Some more colorful than others. And if you're not the type of person who wants to have yellow and blue on your resume, that's fine. You can change and manipulate the colors and the formatting to your liking out there. So that's another kind of perk of using that particular website. When it does come to your resume, and this is just a personal thing with me, I am not a fan of seeing the word objective. I know at the top of resumes, you see an objective statement, and I don't know what it is about that word. It bothers me. So I encourage students to use that area to title it as something else like about me or profile, really any other word outside of objective. And what you're doing there is you're giving your power pitch, 2 to 3 sentences max about who you are and what you're looking for. So, for example, a student that would come to me here, if they were in our mechatronics program, it would say, currently a Wallace State student in the mechatronics program, seeking full-time employment where I can apply my technical skills, and looking for additional opportunities for advancement within the company. You know, it's going to vary from each person, but it's something specific to you, just a quick power pitch on what you're looking for and what you have to offer. When you get past that part of it and you're working on the work and the education pieces, those sections of your resume, those need to be in chronological order. So if you are currently a student at Wallace State somewhere or another college, that's the one that's going to be listed at the top. And then any previous education is going to be listed behind that. You need to try to get at least specific enough to where you can tell them months and dates when it comes to your education and your work experience. So you're going to do the same thing with work. The current place or the most recent place that you've worked at, that's the one that's listed at the top, and then the rest follow behind, not the other way around. Sometimes I see it in the opposite order. And when you are listing those things, you're going to be putting what kind of job responsibilities you had, obviously, underneath your work experience. And so those are just really short general statements about what your responsibility was. Those statements should start out with a verb. So if you were responsible for maintaining a clean, safe working environment, you would start the statement out with maintained, or if you're currently working there, maintain. So you change the different type of tense of the verb. But you start those statements out with the verb and you describe what you're doing there. If you can throw in specifics like a name of software that you're using, a type of equipment or tool or machinery that you've been exposed to, it's good to include that in there because sometimes that's things that they're looking for. Something else is when you're underneath your education section, you're not going to have job responsibilities to list there, but you can still bullet out things that were important that you did while you were there at that particular school. So whether it's high school or college, if you maintain a GPA of a 3.0 or higher, put that on there because that speaks to them about what type of student you are, in turn, what type of employee you will be. If you made Dean's List, President's List, if you participated in clubs and activities and volunteer work, put that on there. If you held a leadership role, even if you were team captain of the football team, those are the things that you want to list, things that point out your leadership skills and your capability to take initiative. So try to dress up each one of those sections and highlight, any kind of accomplishment that you had, whether it was high school or college. Moving on from those sections, the resume, if we're trying to keep it to one page, there is no reason why you shouldn't be able to go ahead and list your professional references on there. Some people do prefer to have that on a second page, and that's fine. That's your prerogative. But professional references, look, these aren't your best friends. These typically are not your family members unless you work for a business that's family owned. These are people who can speak to the type of student or type of employee that you are. So if you have a faculty member or an instructor that you became close with, list them. If you have a previous boss or supervisor that you think could give a good reference, list them. Even if it's just a coworker that knows the type of quality work that you do, go ahead and list them and make sure that these people know that you're listing them. It would be really awkward if I were a person who's hiring you and I picked up the phone and I called your reference and they had no idea that you were looking for a job. So then they're unprepared really to talk to me about what kind of person you are. So give them a heads up that you're looking and that you're listing them on there as a reference. Make sure that you include their first and last name, a good contact phone number that you know is current. So give it a call and make sure that it works. And then if you have an email address, that's great too. I think it's also relevant to list where that individual works at, and if you can find out what their job role is so that you can put their job title. That's always a good thing. So if you can fit those individuals on your resume, go ahead and do so. I'm looking for 2 to 3. If you can get at least 2 or 3 people to list, I think that's a great starting point. If a company requires more than that, I know I've had some in the past that asked for 5. That's fine. You can come up with those too. But as far as your resume goes, 2 to 3 is the safe bet. Moving on from that, I would say that, your resume, again, just like the cover letter, this isn't your life story. That's why we're trying to stick to one page. Highlight your skills. This is a place to put any professional certifications that you have, any unique skill set that you have. If you are in the business world and you want to list how many words per minute that you can type, or any type of software like Microsoft Office that you use, this is where you list those things. If you're in a manufacturing industry, this is where you list the different types of machinery that you've had exposure to or tools that you've used. So this is a time to put those types of things on there. And any achievements. If you've received some type of award, put that on there. That's important. You should recognize that. And this gives you things to talk on when you do get to the interview. These are good talking points. So level, what our skills and qualifications are. When you get into the interview, that's when you dive deeper into those details and can answer some questions for the folks who are interviewing you.
So I'm going to add a few things to that. One of the first things that you should keep in mind is that on average, hiring managers are looking at your resume for approximately 6 to 15 seconds. So they're glancing at it, which is exactly why you keep it to one page and exactly why you're not telling your life story, right? You got to sell them on your skill set and sell them fast. So in your notes, I gave you kind of a rough format of how I set up a cover letter and a resume. You'll notice that I don't include my physical mailing address. And the reason for that is I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with Zillow. People can put your mailing address in, and I have heard of companies using the worth of your home as a way to gauge the compensation package they offer. So I just don't leave it on there. Very rarely will you get physical mail from a place that's looking to hire you. Generally, they're going to contact you via phone or email. So if they ask, of course, provide it, but I don't tend to provide it out of the gates. Also, I can't tell you how much I love what Chrissy said about the objective. Everyone knows why you're turning your resume in. You're wasting words by telling them that you're applying for a job there. So included also in your worksheet is some questions. I call it a value statement, power pitch, about me. These questions will kind of help you kind of workshop your own value statement. What I use that first couple sentences for, and no more than 3, because again, they aren't going to really read paragraphs, is for who I am as a professional. So as a therapist, I talk about, my theoretical orientation and what kind of clients I see. That way they have an idea of what they're getting right out of the gates. Okay, let's see what's next. So skills. One of the little secrets that I use is I keep my syllabi from all of my classes. There's twofold reason for that. One, say you decide, to continue your education later, you'll have those in case your school asks. And two, your professors are writing in their skills that you were supposed to have mastered. These are money in the bank for skills to put on your skills list for syllabi, for resumes. So keep those and scan those for good ideas on what kinds of things you can list on there. Under job experiences, I don't list my work duties. I see a lot of this, and this is why I have a master resume. So on my master resume, it includes everything I ever did at the job. But when I am doing a resume for a specific place that's looking for a specific skill set, that's what I highlight. I use 2 or 3 bullet points, and I use, just like Chrissy said, active verbs, and I also use numbers. So for example, I worked retail as a health and beauty clerk. I don't tell them, that I stocked shelves. Instead, I say that I ordered, received, stocked, and tracked sales for over 200 vendors. This is really different than saying I ordered, received, stocked, and tracked sales. Was it for one company or was it for 200? One of those statements has more oomph behind it. Does that make sense? So if you can use numbers, do it. If you managed a team, how many people were on the team? If you got an award for sales goals, what number did you cross that provided that sale? Make sure that if it doesn't have numbers, that you are using really powerful verbs and that you're being very concise and consistent. So for example, with customer service, you could say delivered quality customer service and education. You want to tell them just what it is and nothing more and nothing less. It takes some tinkering to get the right statement, and play with it. See what works and what feels authentic. Okay, references. I do put mine on a second page. The reason for this, everybody's different. And that's what's great about having access to our career services in particular, because we have a couple of people with varied backgrounds and different ways of doing it. So, and it's interesting because Chrissy talked about using Canva. She's right, those templates can be really challenging to move, so I make my own. That's not a template that I can move around myself. So everybody does it differently. Okay, references. I put them on a second page. Absolutely their name, their title, their contact information, and I add a little piece. So below each one, I give 2 sentences that talks about how long they've known me and what they can speak to about my skill set. And the reason I do this is because that way, if they're calling someone cold, they know what specifically about me that they can ask about, that the person can speak to, and it gives them kind of a warm up into the conversation. So it's not this like awkward, random, out of the blue phone call. Okay, so a quick word about ATS systems, applicant tracking systems. Some places use these to weed out resumes. These are generally your larger employers. They will scan your resume and cover letter and look for keywords. Another reason you tailor for each job is ATS systems. So you want to look at the resume, the job posting, and make sure that the keywords from that job posting are on your resume so that they know that you have the skills that they're looking for. Okay, I think those are my main points. I do want to add, if you have a long work history, if you've been working for a very long time, this isn't your first rodeo, I only put about 10 years worth of material. If it's further than 10 years away, it can be a little outdated, unless it really pertains to the job at hand. If you've got a strong job that's over 10 years, definitely include it. I also am comfortable leaving gaps on my resume because I'll explain those in the interview if asked. But I will pull jobs that don't pertain. So because I have a varied work history, say I'm applying for a job as an engineer. Well, I worked several jobs after my engineering job that weren't engineering. So I'll just not include those because they don't really pertain. But be careful, they might pertain. Leadership skills, lots of skills are transferable. Customer service transfers really well to patient education. So think outside of the box a little bit. It may be a transferable skill. Be creative. Okay. Chrissy, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, one other thing that I could share with everyone that might be a helpful resource here in our department at Wallace State, we have this beautiful little guidebook right here. I know that's probably backwards for all of you, but it's basically an in-depth book that covers all of the things that Jamie and I just talked about and then some. There's more details in here about interviewing and what you should wear and other resources where you can go. It talks about LinkedIn. I mean, just all kinds of good stuff. And so if you're interested in getting this, we do have some in print still here. Not a lot because we are doing a little bit of a revamp to it, but it's also available in a PDF format. So if anybody is interested in getting their hands on that resource, either in paper copy or electronic, you can reach out to Jamie Newman or to myself, Christina Holmes, here at Wallace State, and we would be more than happy to email you or mail you a copy of this particular booklet, just to have as kind of a reference as you're sitting there working on things. You can go back to that and it may answer some of the questions that you have.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you so much for bearing with the speech part, and this is the opportunity that y'all have to ask us any questions you might have, any like special cases, how to address those, and we will answer those. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop.